reflected as a sort of very abstract policy debate where it's about politicians saying we need this, we need that, this is what keeps it safe, and it's this very like macro level policy debate, right? It doesn't feel real, it doesn't feel like it happens to people, and it makes it very easy to just accept. Because if it's not real, then okay, if it works, it works, and I think very often we end up as Singaporeans accepting that line. And I think a lot of people think that, if I don't know anybody in prison or on death row, I don't think I will ever know anybody in prison or death row, then it's not my issue, it's not something that impacts me. But I think what we really wanted to emphasize is that the death penalty as something that is being done in all our names as Singaporeans does impact each and every one of us. It does affect the way that we move around in our own country, it does affect how our society is. And so today we want to invite Swee Lin to share how she feels and how the death penalty has impacted her as someone who feels very strongly about this issue.
Hi everyone, my name is Swee Lin. I'm an actor and I am an abolitionist. The death penalty is barbaric and the use of it makes barbarians of us all. I know most of you know me as an actor, but I did study law at NUS in the 80s. I remember I never practiced though. I remember when I was a law student, I remember spending a lot of time in the library poring over the case studies of Oscar Wilde. I love literature a lot, and some of his trials really read better than some of the plays that he wrote. Oscar Wilde was, of course, convicted and charged for gross indecency, a law that made criminals of homosexual men, even when they loved each other in the privacy of their own bedrooms, a bad law. A law that Singapore here, we kept it for another 60 years after they repealed it in the UK. We only repealed it last year. I'm going to read, guys, so that I won't take up so much time. One of the foundations of the rule of law is that every person is innocent until proven guilty. The burden of proof lies with the prosecution to prove guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. But what we have done here in Singapore for drug cases is we have changed the law so that once someone is caught with a certain amount of drugs, they are then presumed to be guilty of trafficking. They must then prove themselves innocent, or else the death penalty becomes the mandatory sentence. I have been married to my husband, KSU, for 32 years, and he is my whole life. Even if someone murdered him, I would not wish for the death penalty for the person, for what would it do? It would not bring him back. It would be revenge, not justice. A state-sanctioned violent act done in my name. No. What more or less can be said for the death penalty being used in non-violent drug cases? The burden of proof is no small thing. That's why a person is always presumed innocent until proven guilty. As a young law student, I was always very uncomfortable with this overturning of the rule of law. Today, knowing what I know and meeting families of those on death row, I believe that I was right. Almost everyone waiting execution and those who have been executed are people that have come from poor backgrounds. They don't have the means to afford the lawyers and investigators to prove themselves innocent. The law is too skewed against them. They have no chance at all. Nagendran Damlingam had so many appeals for his life locally and internationally because of his intellectual disability, but he was not given a chance. When I think of him, my heart bleeds for my country. We have become a financial success, and we are told that the state must kill these people to keep our success. I cannot see how the death of Again, Jerry, Kalwan, Aswan, all of them, how has that made a jot of difference, except for grief and trauma for their families? My husband and I have become good friends with Panir, the family of Panir Selvan, Panir who is on death row, his sisters Angelia, Sankari, his brothers Prabha and Joshua. We have yet to meet Isaac. We've met his young nephew, Matthew. They have shared with us stories of his youth and his aspirations. Panir, on death row, has become a poet and an activist. He has started the NGO Sebaran Kasih. In Malay, it means spread love, in the hope that youths in Malaysia will not go down the same road that he has. Casey and I read his poems on our live ukulele streams, and we are in the process of helping them with the publication of his death row poetry before. Every time we hear of an execution order, our hearts sink, and the fear and anxiety that we feel, though, must be nothing compared to what the families must go through. But yes, as a Singaporean living here in our Disneyland, these executions are the most violent actions done in our society and done in our name. It leaves us every time with a sense of helplessness and outrage. I long for a country that prizes compassion and humanity over money and success. I love Singapore, and I pray that we will abolish the death penalty, starting with the mandatory death penalty. Malaysia is ahead of us, guys, how can? And I pray that it will happen in my lifetime. I am 61 years old. I cannot wait 60 years, guys. I want to leave you now with an excerpt from Panir's poem, The Grey Sea of Justice. The loneliest prayer of a solitary soul spreads its wings seeking redemption above these unforgiving oceans, wondering if it's an accumulation of fallen tears, of millions of unanswered prayers, murmuring grace and lifting up its gaze, hoping its voice to be heard at the distant shores of mercy, hoping its invisible tears won't just dissolve like a grain of sea salt, to keep fighting the gravity of death with all the positivity that is still left.